Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to try to find out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today is my friend Dawn Hershik. And Dawn broke free from the corporate world in 2014. During a reorganization at the company that she had been with for almost 30 years, Dawn faced a pivotal moment in her career. After much thought, Dawn decided to leave corporate America and, together with her husband Elliott, to pursue their dream of owning a business. In 2015, Dawn and Elliott bought a supporting strategies franchise. Working side by side with her husband, Dawn and Elliott have built a successful accounting business, which now has over 30 employees and is growing. At the heart of their company is a team of skilled, seasoned accounting professionals who provide efficient and effective bookkeeping and controller services to businesses and nonprofits. As Dawn likes to say, her team brings order to chaos in the accounting department of any company. Dawn is also enthusiastic about connecting like-minded individuals who have similar objectives and can benefit from quality introductions. So, Dawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And I'm so excited because I want to start right from the beginning when you decided to leave corporate. Now, full disclosure, I have never been in corporate because it's just like I couldn't bring myself to do it. But
Sure.
for somebody who's been in corporate for that long, almost 30 years, how did you decide to leave?
Yeah, so obviously it wasn't my decision alone. It wasn't easy. I think ultimately it was my decision, but obviously I talked to my husband about, what I was feeling. Leaving a company after so many years was not easy. It would have been just as easy to get another job within the company and stay. But I told Elliot, as scary as not having a job was to me at the time, it just didn't feel right to stay with that company. And he's great. We sat down, we talked about it, and he said, okay, then, you'll leave, we'll figure it out, and we'll go from there. So that's kind of what happened. you know, we,
But
he,
but
let-
you
he
know,
let,
you could have decided to go to another company. Why not?
Well, and that was part of it too. When I left the company that I was with, I did think about, obviously, I applied for other jobs, but I felt like it was a hard road to go down after being at one company for so many years. And two, I wasn't quite sure exactly what I was looking for, what I wanted to do.
How did you figure that out? I mean, that's the place people get stuck.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I think too, it's all about talking to other people. Because if you're only in your own world and you're trying to figure it out, it's very difficult. So you do need to discuss it not only with your partner, your spouse, whoever you have in your life, but other people. So what happened with me is somebody that I had worked with called me just to see how I was doing once I left the company. And we had worked pretty closely together. And he actually introduced me to a franchise coach because I told this person that Elliot and I always talked about having a business together or buying a franchise. And I didn't even know that those people existed. And so he connected me. And that's really the start of us going down the franchise route.
Okay, so now I have to ask you because this is something I never knew about. What's a franchise?
Right. That's what I said to this person. I had no idea. So the franchise coach, and they're also known as business brokers, they will help you decide, first of all, if it makes sense for you to buy a franchise, what types of franchises are out there. A lot of people think of a franchise, they think McDonald's, Burger King, those types of, mostly fast food. But there are thousands of franchises out there. And if you don't know where to start, it's very difficult. You can do the research on your own, but a franchise coach helps you narrow in what you're looking for. First of all, what's your budget? What do you like to do? What don't you want to do at all? So they help you kind of weed through all of the choices that are out there.
And then do they have like, all right, in your circumstance, you went with supporting strategies, but let's say, could they have hooked you up with McDonald's or Starbucks, or like, do they have a line on how you even go about doing this?
Sure. Yeah. So the way it worked from me and the coach that I worked with, we had an initial meeting, just to kind of figure out if we should continue down that path. And then they had a questionnaire for me to fill out with all of these answers. Again, what's your budget? How much do you want to make when you have a franchise? All of that. So then what happened was they brought me a stack of different franchises that kind of fit in what I was looking for. But the other thing that this coach did, which I thought was really important, is he said to me, you know what? I'd love to meet your husband because in my experience, if your partner, spouse, significant other isn't on board with the whole idea of buying a franchise, it's going to be very difficult to be successful. And, I'm sure you talk to people all the time where if you don't have that support system, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong.
Oh, 100%, and money issues, business issues are one of the biggest things that drive a wedge between couples because they're not on the same page, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
would expect that when you start any new business, a franchise included, I mean, it's a lot of work at first.
It is a lot of work. And if only one person is working in the business, that takes a lot of time up front. And so the other person might get resentful that you're
Mhm.
spending so much time building the business. But if they're the right person, if they're understanding and supportive, obviously they're going to know that that's what it takes to be
Right.
successful.
But in your instance, you didn't just have a spouse who was supportive of your decision. Your spouse joined you. I mean, both of you did this, right?
Yeah, we like to say we jumped off the cliff together. And that was really why, Supporting Strategies is an accounting firm. We provide bookkeeping through controller level services, as you said. I am not an accountant, but when the franchise coach met Elliott and heard his story, found out that Elliott is an accountant, wanted to really find a firm to work in, possibly buy out. That's why he brought us Supporting Strategies to look at. And the more we researched it, the more we came to the conclusion that this is something we can both work on together.
Okay, so I have to ask you, were you at least like a little nervous about working with your husband and building this business and I mean, this is a lot of togetherness.
Yeah, I wasn't nervous at all about that piece of it. Obviously there's a lot of unknown. But I think overall, but at that point we had been married for over 25 years, right? And so I had a good sense, and I think he did too, that we would work really well together. And this is what I say too, Karen, in any partnership, whether it's a marriage, a business, and you could be a partner with somebody in business and not be married to them. You
Mhm.
all need to figure out who's going to handle what. And that's why it works with us because we have different areas that we work on and in. Obviously, there's discussion on what the other person is doing. And sometimes it gets a little heated, but we all know, okay, this is what it is, and we'll move on from here.
It sounds like you've established your own boundaries. And so it's like, yeah, this is my job or this is the area, these are the areas I cover, these are the areas you cover, and that you might have input, but ultimately you each have your own jobs, right?
Yeah, yes, definitely. And that was an early lesson. When we first started, it was just Elliot and I. And Elliot, because he's an accountant, was doing the client work. Eventually, we started hiring people to do as we got more clients. And at one point, Elliot came to me and said, okay, I think we need to hire another person. And I'm looking at our book saying, I don't think we can. He said, no, we really do. And at that point, it was Elliot. We had two other people. And I said, no, we can't do it right now. So he didn't. Well, then what happened was one of the people left. We got three new clients. So poor Elliot and this other person were working so hard. It was not a good situation. So after that, I told him, I said, okay, that's your department. I don't interview people. I don't really get involved in that because he and the other managers know exactly what's happening on the operation side. They know when they need to hire people, when they need to fire people. So that's part of it.
That's really interesting, and I think that's really important that I mean, you're setting those boundaries. And what the other thing that I hear you saying that I really want people to also pick up on is that you didn't have everything laid out perfectly when you started.
No, no, no. Yeah, I think for the most part, you learn as you go. And yeah, we always say we try not to make the same mistake twice because there are going to be times when, oh, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, let's move on and not do that again.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Now, I know everybody since COVID has been working virtually, but your business has been virtual from the get-go. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things we liked about this franchise when we were researching it. We're home based. All of the people that we hire are home based. And it really is great for all of us from a flexibility standpoint. We're able to hire some very experienced accountants to do the work for our clients. And part of it is that flexibility that we allow them.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. But in terms of the physical layout of your house and your spaces, I mean, you're living together, you're working together in the same place you're living together. I mean, a lot of relationships and marriages did not survive COVID.
Oh,
How
I
did you
know.
do
It's interesting. And clearly, in any relationship, sometimes you need to take a break from each other, right? But especially in the beginning, I do mostly sales and marketing, so I'm out a lot, whether it's networking events, meeting people for coffee, and if we're both on a video meeting at the same time, we're not in the same room, so there is some separation that naturally happens, or one of us might have an evening event to go to. It just works for us. And I wish I could tell people what the secret ingredient is. I think a lot of it is flexibility, communicating and knowing sometimes, right, you can read the other person's mood and just say, okay, I'm not going to bring that up right now because I know it's just going to turn into a fight. I'm going to step back and revisit that subject later at another time.
Yeah, that is so key. I mean, the whole point about communication, and I think that being partners in a business as well as a marriage, you've got to be able to talk to each other and
Right.
be honest.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, honesty for sure,
You know,
because it's never going to work if
yeah,
you're not.
no, and just to the point of your story with the person when Elliott wanted to hire someone and you're like, yeah, no, 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 and it turned out that yeah, you probably should have at that point. Um, the ability for you to say to Elliott, you know what, you were right. This is your baby now.
Right.
I mean, it takes a level of maturity and communication that makes things work.
And the other piece too, and I think this is true, not just with the partnership and relationship with your employees, there has to be a level of trust,
Yeah.
right? And with Elliot and myself, we trust each other explicitly, which didn't happen overnight, right? That takes time as you're going through a relationship. But now also with our employees, as we've grown our business, we've delegated more and more. And so we use a phrase that says trust but verify, right? You can't bring somebody on board and say, here's all this work I want you to do for us, and just leave them alone, right? You trust when you hire somebody that they have the skills to do it, but
Mhm.
they need to learn your process and how you like to work with your clients. And so you can't just let it go and not make sure that everything is going okay.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, it's your business, it's your name on it, it's your work product. You've got to keep a certain standard,
Right.
but what advice? All right, so you jumped ship from corporate. Was Elliott in corporate too, or he was in another accounting firm?
He was in corporate. Yeah,
Okay.
actually working at the same firm.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, very interesting stories there, but, yeah, so we were both in corporate, good benefits, good company, but again, something was, I think, telling both of us that this is the time to do it, and so that's what we ended up doing, and I say, once we made the decision that I was gonna leave my job, small things started falling into place that led us to where we are now.
So, what would you say to somebody else who is still in corporate and is struggling to make the same decision that you made? Maybe they don't have the outward prompt of a reorganization or something like that, but, or maybe they do, but they're still struggling to say, do I stay with the sure thing? Or do I jump off into the unknown and start a business or a franchise or whatever? What advice would you give a person like that?
I would say find someone you trust to discuss it with, right? Whether it's a spouse, a partner, a friend who is not gonna poo-poo your idea, right? I mean, we all have those friends that say, "What are you thinking?" I had those friends. Like, what do you mean you're quitting? You're leaving? What are you gonna do?
Yeah, really. What are you
So
smoking?
and it does take some time, right? There's a process that you have to go through to make that decision. Ultimately, you have to make the decision. But I think it's always a good idea to get feedback from other people that you trust their opinion of. Maybe they know somebody who went through it and you can talk to them. It's the network of people that you surround yourself with that's really going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, and I know personally you have got an amazing network of people around you, but it seems like that's something that you've always valued.
Yeah, I think, early when we first started this business, I had no network. I didn't know what I was doing, but that was part of what we got out of being in a franchise system. They had somebody that coached us, okay, would talk to us if I had an issue with sales or marketing, I could reach out to that person. And they were really the ones that instilled in us the importance of relationship building. It doesn't happen overnight, right? And you have to nurture those networks, right? It's great that you're meeting hundreds of people, but what do you do with those hundreds of names, right? You have to keep reaching back out, grabbing coffee with them, lunch. Yeah, it's just checking to see how's it going. Let's catch up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you were, let's say somebody does jump ship and they're starting their own business, what advice would you give someone who is just starting? And at what point do they decide that they've grown enough that they need help? Like to your point, you didn't think you needed help. Elliott said, "Oh, yes, we did." And so there was a difference of opinion. Well, what about other small business owners who might like, how do they decide when they're ready for employees, when they're ready for
Right.
help, when they need accounting service? How do you know that stuff?
Well, again, I think it goes back to who you're surrounding yourself with, right? You need trusted people, experts at what they do, whether it's a business attorney, an HR person, a bookkeeper, an accountant. And so you need to at least have a conversation. Having a conversation with somebody usually does not cost anything, right? And if they're a trusted person that you've gotten to know, you can just say, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. What's been your experience with that? Or do you know somebody that I can talk to?" And then going back to making sure that your processes are in place. If you're doing your bookkeeping on your own, that's great. Even if it's just in Excel, you need to keep track of what money you're spending, what money you're bringing in. All of those things you want to keep track of, and then at some point decide if you're not getting that done, if you're not handling the books, if you're not sending out invoices, that's a problem because then you don't have money coming in. At that point, you might say, "I think I need help," because business owners need to focus on revenue generating tasks. And if that's not what you're doing, the business will suffer. And I have an example of that in our own business when we first started. Elliot did our books because he could. He's an accountant. But what was happening is the busier we got, he wasn't doing our books because he was focused on the employees, the client work. And so we finally at one point said to ourselves, we have associates that can do this work. So we actually have one of our associates handling our books to make sure that everything's getting accounted for correctly, and we can make important decisions based on those numbers.
So it sounds like the basis for the decision is looking at what's going on in the business itself, and at what point, being honest about at what point you need help, it sounds like.
Right. Right. And I think too, some people think, oh, if I ask for help, that's going to mean that I don't know what I'm doing. But I think it's the opposite. And I think there's a lot of things that business owners, you can't know everything, right? And so at some point, you do need to ask for, if you start hiring employees without getting help in that area, there's a lot of missteps that can happen, right? With employment law or, issues that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and I know, just because of my background as a lawyer, you don't want to have tax issues. You just really don't. The IRS does not play, especially when it comes to employee withholding taxes and other kinds of business tax issues. That's not something you want to like close your eyes, hold your nose, and hope for the best.
No, and we say that all the time. We don't do the annual tax returns, but we have a whole list of trusted advisors, trusted tax accountants that we're happy to refer to. What we do is make sure that everything is in order. So when the tax accountant is ready to do the taxes, they have all the information they need. There's no back and forth, which, essentially then means that you're not paying as much to get your taxes done because they don't have to go in and adjust things.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, now I'm really enjoying our conversation, but I want to throw you a curveball. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So as you know, this podcast deals a lot with decision making. We've talked about decisions to start a business, to leave corporate, all the other things. Just out of curiosity, what is the best decision you've ever made? I mean, it could be business, could be personal, but what's the best decision you've ever made?
Oh boy. That's
I know, I just threw you a curveball.
you did. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever stopped to think about it. Um, but and this is going way back. I think one of the best decisions I ever made was moving from my hometown to Illinois and having faith in myself that I could make it.
Okay, tell me more about that. First of all, where were you from? And tell me about that faith.
So I'm originally from Ohio, but I knew people in Illinois. So I was familiar with the area. And I just knew it was kind of like when I left corporate, there was just a feeling that said, you need more. And that's why I left my hometown. I knew that I wanted more out of life. I wanted to really find something that made me happy that I could do. And so I took a chance. I moved out with no job. My sister was out here at the time, so I moved in with her for a time. And then I just kind of went from there. And I can't explain it. I never thought of myself as a risk taker, but I think that's a pretty big risk.
No, that is a big risk when you don't. I mean, yes, you at least had your sister, but with no job, no anything except a sister, and you move in, you're like, okay, world, here I am.
Yeah.
I think that qualifies as a pretty big risk.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that was because when I made that decision to move out to Illinois, everything that came after really, again, led me to where I am now. Of course, you go through life and you think, oh man, that really threw me a curveball. I'm at the lowest point that I've ever been. How am I going to survive this? And you do, right? And again, sometimes it comes down to finding help, finding somebody to talk to, whether that's a professional, whether it's a coach, a psychiatrist, whatever. You can't do everything alone. Right. And sometimes you start out that way and then you realize, okay, something's not working.
But, and I just wanted to follow up because you've mentioned a couple times now how you have that little voice and you just felt like you needed to do the thing, make the decision that you did. How did you hear the voice? How did you know it wasn't something you were just making up in your head?
Well, when I made the decision to move, part of that voice was my sister. She's like,
Okay, all
come
right.
on, yeah,
That's
come
fair.
on. No, but if I would have ignored her, saying come out and just stayed in that safe bubble, never would have had the life that I have now. And the same with the corporate world. I could have stayed where I was with the company that I was with. But I can't explain it. It was just something, it's like a gut feeling, right? Your instincts are speaking to you. And sometimes you really need to listen. Or again, if you're getting that feeling, run it by somebody else. Say, hey, I've been having this nagging feeling. What do you think? And, then talk to 2 or 3 other people and get, a consensus on what's going on.
Yeah, but it sounds like you need to talk to people who, getting back to your earlier point, number one, that you trust, and number two, that know you really well.
Yeah, or even people that have gone before you. Like I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I'm always happy to talk to people who are thinking about buying a franchise. What does that look like? What's that process? How did you make the decision? Because I think we all need to help each other. And if we can share knowledge that we've gained or talk about mistakes we've made so that other people can avoid it, I think that we're all just the better for it.
I could not agree more, and I think that is a beautiful place to wrap this up. Dawn, thank you so much for being here. You have been an amazing guest. This is a great conversation. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to hook up with you?
Yeah, the best way is going to be through email. So my email address, and I know you'll share it, but it's D Hershik, my first initial last name at supportingstrategies.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Dawn. And I hope people will reach out to you if they have questions about franchises.
Yeah, anything.
Just want to network.
Working with my spouse. I
Yeah,
love to
there you
talk
go.
about
That's
that.
a big one.
Right.
So
Thanks, Karen.
thank you so much for being here. And for all of you who may be listening or watching this podcast, if you like what you've heard, if you want more of this, give the episode a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.